This is Josh with ATEC. Today we're going to go over a blade change on a Crater 450. Process is virtually the same for Crater 550 and 760. Today we're here in our shop. We're going to go over a blade change. Also include belt tension. We're going to start with two 8mm Allen head wrenches. We're going to put one in the back side here. Hold it in place. Our other is going on our front side, and we'll start by loosening this bolt. Carefully remove the blade off the arbor. It's very crucial you pay attention to this ring. We call it a step ring. What it is, it's designed to allow for either a 30 or 32mm arbor hole on your saw blade to work. Whichever arbor hole you have on your blade, you want to face any excess in towards this ring, or face it in towards the motor. If we're running a 32mm arbor hole on our saw blade, it would go like this. If we're running a 32mm, or excuse me, a 30mm, it's going to go like this. Something to keep in mind. We'll note it again when we reassemble our blade. Next, we're going to remove the belt cover. On this 450, it's a 5mm. That now gives us access to our belt. And this is our tensioner. The tensioner is operated by this 10mm bolt head. There's also a 10mm jam nut which holds it in place. To tension your belt, you first want to crack the 4 motor bolt attachment bolts loose. Break tension on those. You want to loosen your jam nut here. Loosen the jam nut, and then righty-tighty, which runs the bolt up, which provides more tension. Lefty-loosey to loosen tension. Now when we tension these belts, I like to run a little bit on the tight side, but you don't want to be able to turn this a full 90 degrees. You can see how that is not quite 90. That's perfect. It's tight. It's got a little bit of give. That's where these like to run, especially if you're cutting any dense, heavy, tough extrusion. You're going to need that tension there, basically so the spindle shaft doesn't slip on the belt. You'll end up eating belts if it's not tensioned properly. But if you can go a full 90 degrees with that, it's not tight enough. So after you set tension, run that jam nut up, set the jam nut in place, tighten your 4 motor bolts back up, and we've now set tension on our belt. And that process is the same 450, 550, and 760s. We're going to put our belt cover back in place. first piece on there. Now your saw, you'll know, but your saw blade should be stamped with lettering designation to tell you what size arbor hole you have, so you know how to face this. In this case, we're working with a 30 millimeter saw arbor, so we're using the small side. So we're going to face it this way. I like to set my ring on here first. Makes it easier to align the blade on here. After we get that ring on, be mindful when you're putting this on. This ring needs to fit on this spindle shaft snug, not loose. If it's loose at all, your blade's not going to sit perfectly centered on that spindle shaft. And when you turn the saw on and it fires up, it has the potential to vibrate the machine very badly. So be mindful when you're assembling this back together that this ring is snug to the shaft and not loose in any fashion. If it is, you're going to have issues. So after you set the ring in the exact spot that you want to put your blade back on. So we know that we have our blade sitting on the 30 millimeter side of that step ring, and it's on there. The next piece that goes on does have a flat spot to match up with the flat spot on the upper spindle shaft. Just turn that until it finds the right spot. And then your bolt and washer go on next. This washer is cut out right there, and it's designed to just fit over this spindle stem here. And the reasoning is that depending on what you're cutting, certain customers will run a thinner blade. If you run a thinner blade than the standard blade that's on here, that will poke out a little bit, and that's why that cutout is there, to allow for any excess that stem protrudes, so we can still get everything nice and tight, snug, and centered on the shaft. Now remember, we do have our second 8 millimeter wrench still on the back side of the spindle shaft. We're going to use it in the same way to help us tighten everything back up as well. All right, I know that my 8 millimeter is still on the back side. We're going to use our other 8 millimeter in the front here, and we're basically just using that 8 millimeter wrench on the back to rest against the motor to help us tighten this up here. I like to tighten them just like anything. You want to go until it starts to bounce back at you, then you know you're tight. If you keep going, you're going to run into problems. But tighten it so you feel that bounce back and you know you're good. Another crucial part that I keep mentioning, make sure we get that other wrench out of there, because if we try to start that up with that wrench in there, we're going to create some problems. Other wrench is out. I know we're clear on the back side. We're clear on the front side. And that's it. That is a blade change and belt tension on an ATEC crater saw.